In the burning dawn of Babylon, the walls of the empire rose like mountains of stone, vast and merciless. Beneath their shadow walked a young man of royal blood from Judah, his skin dark as desert soil, his eyes calm with wisdom beyond his years. His name was Daniel, and his journey began in chains. The air carried the scent of conquest, iron, dust, and sorrow. Babylon had conquered Jerusalem, and among the captives taken were the brightest minds of the Hebrew people. Daniel was chosen not for his strength, but for his intellect, his discipline, and his unwavering devotion to the unseen God who ruled even over kings. Inside the palace of Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel and his companions, all dark-skinned youths from noble African lineage, were stripped of their names, their language, and their identity. Babylon tried to make them new men, molded in the image of its empire, yet within Daniel burned a fire that could not be extinguished. He learned their sciences, their mathematics, their astronomy, not to serve them, but to understand how the Most High weaved truth into the very fabric of creation. His wisdom drew the attention of the palace scholars, who could not comprehend how a foreigner, a man taken from the ashes of a conquered city, could speak with such depth and authority. The palace halls echoed with the footsteps of power. Merchants from Cush, scholars from Egypt, and generals from Assyria. It was a world where dark-skinned nations had once ruled, and now served under Babylon's iron fist. Yet Daniel moved with the quiet dignity of one who knew that empires rise and fall, but truth endures forever. One night, the emperor's court was thrown into chaos. Nebuchadnezzar had dreamed a dream that shook his soul. None of the magicians or astrologers could explain it. The dream was of a colossal statue, its head of gold, chest of silver, belly of bronze, legs of iron, and feet of clay. It stood tall and terrible, until a stone, cut without human hands, struck its feet and shattered it to dust. The wise men trembled before the king, unable to interpret the vision. Daniel, still young and untested, prayed in silence. He sought not the wisdom of stars or scrolls, but of the living spirit that whispered through dreams and symbols. That night, the mystery was revealed to him. He saw empires rising and falling like tides, from Babylon's golden glory to future kingdoms of steel and corruption. He understood that all human power, no matter how proud, would crumble before the eternal kingdom of the Most High. When Daniel was brought before Nebuchadnezzar, he stood not as a servant, but as a prophet. The firelight gleamed on his dark skin as he spoke the truth of the dream, that the statue represented the succession of empires, and that one day the God of heaven would raise a kingdom that would never fall. The court was silent. The emperor's fury turned to awe. For the first time, Babylon's throne heard the voice of a man who spoke not from fear, but from divine conviction. Daniel was elevated to a place of honor, clothed in fine robes, and placed among the rulers of the empire. Yet he never forgot who he was: a son of Judah, a child of Africa's soil, a vessel of divine purpose. As the palace torches burned through the night, Daniel gazed from the balcony toward the stars, the same constellations his ancestors once traced across the deserts of Cush and Canaan. He knew his journey had only begun. Babylon had its throne, but he served a higher one. The stone of the dream would come, in its time, and the empires of men would fall before the eternal mountain of truth. The sun over Babylon burned like molten copper, pouring its heat upon the golden streets of the empire. Statues of gods towered over the markets, their faces carved in arrogance and stone. In the center of this splendor stood a monument greater than any before, a colossal image of gold, the king's vision brought to life. It gleamed like a second sun, demanding worship from every nation under Babylon's rule. Daniel, though elevated among the scholars, watched in silence as the decree was announced. All who hear the sound of the music shall bow to the image, or be cast into the furnace of fire. The empire demanded submission, not faith. It sought unity in fear, not truth. Among those chosen to stand in defiance were Daniel's companions, men of the same exiled bloodline, with skin dark as obsidian and hearts fierce with devotion. They had learned the language of Babylon, but their souls belonged to the Most High. When the music roared, they remained still. The crowd's sea of kneeling bodies parted around them like water breaking against unyielding stone. Whispers spread through the court like smoke. The Hebrews defy the decree. The guard seized them, and soon the furnace was prepared, a monstrous pit of flame, the color of the desert sun at dusk. Daniel stood apart, helpless to intervene, but his spirit burned with the same faith that sustained them. When the men were brought before the throne, they spoke not to defend themselves, but to declare the supremacy of their God. Yet there were no words recorded that day, only silence and fire. The furnace roared. The soldiers, mighty and armored, perished in the heat as they threw the captives in. The onlookers turned away, shielding their eyes from the infernal blaze. But then, a cry rose from the king himself. Did we not cast 3 into the fire? In the heart of the flames walked 4. Their bodies were unburned, their robes untouched, and around them shone a brilliance not of this world. The 4th, radiant and dark as midnight lit by stars, walked beside them, a manifestation of the divine, the unseen protector of the oppressed. The heat that destroyed soldiers became cool as wind for the faithful. The flames bowed before the power that no empire could command. When the men stepped out of the furnace, their skin still glistened, untouched by smoke or harm. The crowd trembled. The king fell silent. For the first time in Babylon's history, power itself had witnessed a force greater than fear. Daniel watched from the shadows, his heart thunderous. He knew what this meant. The Most High had revealed his supremacy, not through armies or wealth, but through resilience, through faith unbroken by fire. That night, Daniel returned to his chamber and gazed at the city, a forest of ziggurats and torches stretching beyond the horizon. Babylon seemed invincible, but Daniel now knew its weakness, pride. Every empire that exalts itself above the divine truth is destined to fall. He prayed in silence, his hands lifted toward the heavens of his ancestors, the same sky over Cush, Egypt, and Judah. The constellations gleamed like eternal witnesses. Somewhere beyond the veil of stars, the divine hand that shielded his brothers was still at work. The miracle of the furnace spread across the empire. Merchants whispered it in markets, slaves recited it in the fields, and even priests of foreign gods trembled at the name of the unseen power. Daniel understood then that Babylon could command bodies, but never souls. The real battle was not between nations. It was between truth and deception, between faith and fear. He began to write secretly, records of dreams, prophecies, and visions. Words that would one day outlast Babylon itself. And as the moon hung heavy over the desert, Daniel felt the weight of destiny settling upon him. Fire could not consume faith, and empire could not silence truth. The age of kings would pass, but the wisdom of the Most High would remain, eternal, unshaken, and alive in those who dared to stand when all others bowed. Night in Babylon shimmered with gold and wine. The empire that ruled nations celebrated itself in endless feasts, its towers reaching for the heavens, its people drunk on power. Yet deep within the chambers of the royal court, Daniel saw what others could not, the shadow of time falling upon the empire's brilliance. Years had passed since the furnace, But the memory of divine fire still lingered. Daniel had risen higher among the king's advisors, not by ambition, but by the wisdom of the Spirit within him. He had interpreted dreams that no other could, revealed mysteries that silenced priests, and spoken truths that reshaped kings. But the greatest revelation was yet to come. One night, as the winds whispered through the hanging gardens, the king was tormented by visions, colossal beasts rising from the sea, empires born from the earth, devouring and falling in their turn. Daniel, called once again, entered the chamber. The scent of incense and fear filled the air. The king's face was pale, his eyes haunted. Daniel closed his eyes and sought the truth beyond the veil. Images unfolded before him like thunder over water, a lion with eagle's wings, a bear rising on one side, a leopard with 4 heads, and a final beast, dreadful, iron-toothed, unstoppable. These were kingdoms, Daniel realized, each built upon pride and oppression. But then, amidst the chaos, the vision changed. A figure descended from the clouds, dark as the fertile soil of Eden, crowned with light. He came not with armies, but with authority born from eternity. Thrones were set, and the Ancient of Days took his place. Rivers of fire flowed from his presence, and the books of judgment were opened. Daniel trembled, yet peace settled within him. He understood. The kingdoms of men would rise and fall, but one kingdom, a divine kingdom, would endure forever. Not carved by human hands, not forged by conquest, but established by righteousness and truth. When the vision ended, the silence of the night seemed endless. Daniel lifted his eyes toward the heavens. The stars above Babylon burned like eyes of ancient witnesses, marking the turning of ages. He knew his role now, not to serve power, but to prepare the world for what would come after. He began writing in secret, prophecies sealed for generations unborn. Words that spoke of beasts and horns, of empires and deliverance, of the coming of one like a son of man, whose dominion would never end. In the days that followed, Babylon began to crumble from within. The feast grew louder, the rulers more arrogant, but the cracks in the empire deepened. Daniel watched it all with quiet sorrow. He had seen this fate before, in the dreams, in the visions, in the pride that blinded men to their own ruin. One night, as he prayed facing the open window toward his homeland, soldiers burst into his chamber. The decree was law, no prayer to any god but the king himself. Daniel did not resist. His faith was older than empires, stronger than fear. Thrown into the den of lions, he met the darkness as an old friend. Their eyes glowed in the shadows, golden and fierce. But as dawn broke, Daniel stood unharmed, surrounded by peace where death should have ruled. The empire trembled once again, for no man could harm one guarded by the Most High. Years passed. Daniel grew old, his beard silver like desert dust, yet his spirit remained sharp, his eyes alight with divine fire. He had seen kings rise and fall, and he knew now that the true kingdom was not of this earth. As he looked upon the horizon, the ruins of Babylon slowly overtaken by sand and time, Daniel whispered a final prayer. Not of fear nor longing, but of faith fulfilled. The kingdoms of men pass away, he thought, but the throne of the Eternal stands forever. And so Daniel's life faded into legend, not as a servant of empire, but as a prophet of eternity. His visions would travel through centuries, across lands and tongues, to awaken a truth that no fire, no beast, no king could ever destroy, that the power of God walks with those who stand firm, even when surrounded by lions, and that his kingdom, born not of gold nor pride, will reign without end.